Chapter 9. Walking Underwater. "Quick, haul him up!" Uncle Russ shouted, as Scowbanger continued to jerk on the line. The two Hollister girls, with their father and Ricky, hauled the diver to the surface and pulled him to the dock. Pam quickly unscrewed the helmet, and her father lifted it off Scowbanger's head. The poor old man was only half conscious. "See what you did?" Holly scolded Homer, who was too frightened to say a word. "You naughty boy! You nearly drowned him!" Sue added, shaking a chubby finger. While Mr. Hollister held Scowbanger upright, the others removed his diving suit. Then they laid him on the dock. Mr. Hollister massaged his wrists, and Mrs. Hollister bathed his head with cool water. Presently, Scowbanger said he felt like himself once more. "Somebody shut off my air," he said, looking around accusingly. Seeing Homer, he cried, "I'll bet you did!" Homer said that he had not meant to hurt Scowbanger. "All right, boy," Scowbanger said. "Just so long as you didn't do it intentionally, but hereafter keep your hands off other people's property." He turned to Uncle Russ. "Did you make enough sketches?" "I'd like to do a few more," the cartoonist replied, "but you mustn't go down again." Pete, who was on the dock now, said, "How about letting me go down this time?" "A boy has never used this outfit," Scowbanger replied, "but if your father's willing, it's fine with me." Mr. Hollister exchanged a few words with his wife, then said if Scowbanger would supervise the operation, Pete might go down in the diving suit. "Yikes!" Ricky cried. "I wish I was you." Pete was ready in a few minutes, but he had trouble lifting his weighted feet as he moved to the ladder. Scowbanger started the air pump, and the boy gradually descended into the water, as his brother and sisters looked on enviously. When Pete touched bottom, he began to walk forward. He was surprised how much easier it was than on land. "I wish I could find a pirate ship or a treasure," he thought. But at first he saw nothing except the fish that swam around him. Then among some plants growing in the sand he spied an old boot. He picked it up, wondering if Uncle Russ would think this a funny picture to sketch. At this moment there was a tug on his line, which was a signal for the boy to start upward. He walked back to the steps and climbed the dock. When the watchers saw the boot, they laughed. "But maybe there's a treasure in it," Ricky said hopefully. "Oh yeah?" Homer sneered. Nevertheless, he thrust his hand deep into the toe of the boot. Then a funny look came over his face, and he yelled, "Ow! Something stung me!" He jerked out his hand, which had a red welt on it. Ricky picked up the fallen boot, held it upside down, and shook it. Out fell a baby jellyfish. "Some treasure," the boy said in disgust. Meanwhile, the diving suit was taken off Pete. But before he had a chance to tell of his adventure, Homer whined, "Somebody do something for me. My hand hurts." "Come back to the house with me," Mrs. Hollister said, "and I'll put some lotion on it." As she and Homer walked off the dock, the others helped Scowbanger put the diving suit in his jalopy. Uncle Russ thanked him, and the old man drove off. When Pete walked home, he noticed that the wind was rising. Good kite weather, he thought. That evening, he worked with the supplies he'd brought from the trading post, and by bedtime, he'd put together a large, good-looking kite. "By morning, the glue will be dry, and I can fly it," he told himself. Pete was awake early, put on his bathing trunks and a sweater, and went to the kitchen. After eating some fruit, cereal, and milk, the boy wrote a short note, saying where he would be. Leaving it on the table, Pete picked up his kite and ran outside. The kite looked even better in the daylight, and he was eager to see how it would fly. Reaching the beach, he saw 3 other boys about his age, already flying kites. "I suppose they're practicing for the contest," Pete said, walking up to them. The boys looked up and smiled. They resembled one another so much, with their turned-up noses and black curly hair, Pete was sure they were brothers. "Hello, I'm Pete Hollister from Shoreham." "Hi, I'm Tom Frasier," the tallest boy replied. These are my brothers Tim and Terry. He grinned. People call us the Frasier Steps. We're 12, 11, and 10 years old. We live at Seagull Beach all the year round. When did you come? Terry asked Pete. We just arrived. My uncle, Russ Hollister, has a house here. Maybe you've heard of him. He's a cartoonist. Oh, is he your uncle? Tim said. His comic about Airman Alphonse is the funniest thing I ever read. Maybe we can meet him. Sure thing, Pete smiled. Come to the house any time. He pointed out the one which Uncle Russ had rented. Then, eyeing the Frasier boys' kites, he went on. They're swell. Did you make them? Yes, Tom answered. We're entering them in the contest. It's on the 17th. Have you heard about it? Pete said he had and wanted to go in it. The prizes are nifty, Terry told him. We hope to win one this year. Last summer, not a single local boy got one. And were our faces red, Tom laughed. The fellows in our school are determined not to let the visitors take all the prizes. Well, good luck, said Pete. But leave one prize for me, will ya? Then he added, Say, if you fellows have lived here all your lives, you must know something about the pirate ship, the Mystery. The brothers laughed, and Tom said, Oh, that's an old story around here. People have been looking for it for years. Every summer a new outfit comes with a diver. But no one's found out a thing, Terry spoke up. You mean they haven't even turned up a clue? Pete asked. Nothing that you could say was part of the mystery. Of course, people are always finding souvenirs buried on the beach, but they probably didn't come from the pirate ship. Pete thought this over a few moments as he got his kite ready to fly. But he decided not to be disheartened by the Frasiers' talk. Somebody at some time had to find the mystery. It could just as well be the Hollisters as anyone else. I'd better get started flying my kite to see how it works, if I hope to win a prize, he laughed. The talk turned again to the contest. Tom said that children came from miles around to take part in the annual event. Seagull Beach was crowded with people on that day. The four boys walked to the top of the dune where the wind was exceptionally strong. Soon it was rustling the kite paper as they let out the strings foot by foot. For the first time, Pete noticed that Tom's had a clown painted on his, Tim's was shaped like a pig, and Terry's resembled an airplane. When he asked them why, Tom said they figured there might be more of a chance to win a prize with an unusual type. This is neat fun, Pete said as the kites sailed into the air. Wait till you see 100 of them flying all at the same time, Tim told him. I can hardly wait for the 17th, Pete remarked, letting out his string very fast. All four of the kites now looked like birds, soaring high in the sky over the dunes. Then suddenly Tom's began to dip, first in one direction and then the other. I think one of the sticks is broken, he observed. Better reel her in before she crashes. He wound up the string as fast as he could, and in a few moments the kite gently touched the ground, not far from where he was standing. It's a broken stick, all right, Pete said, running over to examine it. I'll help you fix it, Tom. He glanced about for a place to tie his own kite string. Seeing a stout bush, he went over and tied the string tightly. Then he ran back to where Tom was sitting in the tall dune grass. Let's splice this broken stick together, Pete suggested. Okay, thanks. While Tom held the broken ends of the stick firmly together, Pete tied a string around and around them. Just as he finished the job, Tom glanced up and said, Here comes that Ruffley kid again. I wish he wouldn't bother us. So do I, Pete agreed. But Homer walked up to them looking very important. What are you doing? He asked. Repairing my kite stick, Tom replied without looking up. Why don't you make 'em so they can't break? Pete noticed the color rush up into his friend's cheeks, but Tom held his temper and did not reply. When Homer realized he could not ruffle Tom, he turned to Pete. I suppose you think you've got the best kite at Seagull Beach, he said. We'll see when the contest is held, Pete replied as he finished mending the split stick. Hey, where's your kite? Homer asked suddenly, looking around the dune. Before Pete could reply, Homer glanced into the sky. He spied Pete's kite. "Not bad," he said softly. When Homer saw the kite string tied to the bush, he ran over to it. "Hey, let that alone," Pete shouted. But Homer already had untied the string and was holding it in his hand. "Hang on to that tight," Pete warned, running over to the boy. But just then a strong gust made an extra hard tug on the string. It slipped from Homer's hands. "Grab it!" Pete yelled, as the ball of string bounced and tumbled along the ground. He ran after the string too, but every time they tried to grasp it, the string yanked out of their reach. In a moment, the kite headed out toward the ocean. "I'll never get it now," Pete thought woefully.